Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jayakula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are.
How do you practice setting aside the need to be okay, to be right, to be seen well? Is that something you can practice? Or do you just keep it in mind all the time?
It is something you can practice, but what you can't practice is the desire to do it. Every effort begins with a desire. And desire, I'm sure, has myriad instigators, but there's kind of two main ways that desire appears. And desire is it's like a river moving us in a certain direction. So one way that desire appears is when we do sadhana and we gain enough clarity that we see that the things that brought us pleasure or brought us rewards or kept us feeling protected in some way or just got us through the day or got us through various social situations, when we start to experience those things as limiting and imprisoning, when we really begin to feel the discomfort and burden and the way that those things are cramping us, when we begin to feel how inauthentic they are, when we begin to really feel they're not really giving us the rewards that we want, and that very often they're just masking a lot of unhappiness and loneliness, which is important to feel and not mask. When we really begin to feel the burden of those behaviors that maybe we got rewards from before, then the desire to be free of those things starts to increase. And then we have the opportunity to set it aside, because in a moment when those behaviors are manifesting, we can feel the desire and we will find a way to eventually to step out of those things. It might take a long time. It might not take a long time. It just depends. There's practices that we can do to help us to drop more directly into a more expansive, natural, spontaneous condition. But again, we have to have the desire to put those practices into play. There's also just ways that we find on our own when that desire becomes desperation, when we really feel how manacled we are by those behaviors and those emotional patterns. A real sense of desperation can develop to be free of them, even while we still might be feeling the pleasure of them, right? That's one way. The other way is being moved by an example or examples of people who have more freedom and more spontaneity. Usually our teachers are the great teachers that we read about or come into contact somehow with. When we have that feeling of we see our own, not just see, but experience the possibility of our own freedom in another person, which is one of the great functions of the teacher, then we can do practices called guru yoga, where that desire to have the condition of the teacher be our own condition can open us, can create a sense of porousness and receptivity so that we can receive transmission, so that we can enter into a common experience of continuity with the teacher or some great being, like a lot of Tibetan Buddhist practices, they practice with Guru Rinpoche. That transmission is still available. And so that's another way we can begin to erode those patterns of limitation. So we have to have the desire to do it. And we need some tools and we need some guidance. But the desire is absolutely the most important thing. If we don't desire it, we won't even embark. And it doesn't do any good to tell ourselves that it would be better to be a different way, or I should be more compassionate, or I this, that, and the other thing. Because if we don't truly feel the desire, it'll just be conceptual. Everybody has the capacity to feel this desire, but then it depends on what's in the way. And one of the things that's in the way is fear of the unknown and fear of desire itself. It's a very powerful force, especially when we recognize that we're going to go through periods when we're not functioning as smoothly as we used to, because we're not having our same supports, when we're going to be out of sync with our friends or out of sync with our culture, because our whole culture is running on these fumes of self-concern and self-promotion and brittleness and inauthenticity and lies. So many of us just exist lying about ourselves. Every social interaction involves lies. Pretty much everything that some people do involves lies. Projections of a self that isn't actually how we feel or actually how we are. All of this creates incredible insecurity and lack of self-confidence, and it ultimately creates a feeling of distaste for oneself, because we're like trampling on our own value. So we have to have desire, and we have to be willing to surrender to that desire. And we have to have some courage to be messy, because we are going to be messy. One of the things that helped me is coming into a relationship with a teacher like Ma, or any teacher that I've had who had clarity. Like a couple of my teachers have had immense clarity. And realizing that, you know what, it doesn't matter if no one else notices the inauthenticity and the lies, because those teachers notice it. And Ma notices it. God notices it. And when you stop lying to yourself that you're actually getting away with it, with all the fakeness and the projection and the bragging and the massaging of your personality and the self-presentation and all the stuff that our society runs on, when you stop buying into the lie that you're actually getting away with that stuff and that there's always someone that is seeing what you're really doing, that was motivating for me. I have a feeling that Ma's like looking over my shoulder 24/7 and rolling her eyes at me a lot. And that's extremely helpful. You know, when God rolls her eyes at you. And it's friendly, you know, it's not, you know, mean eye rolling. But I have that experience a lot. It's just like, you know, you're just not getting away with this. I see you.
Are you ever trying to impress her?
No, what would be totally, totally pointless. Absolutely, completely, 100% pointless. That's not what God wants from you. And it's also not what the teacher wants from you. It just becomes, you know, because we live in the culture we live in, it's not just like one student is trying to impress the teacher or be thought well of. It's like every student is trying to do that. And it's just so tiresome, because it's not sadhana. It's beside the point. It's just more of the same. It gets you nowhere. I know that we each have inherent value, and that is feelable and palpable. So you want to have that experience of your inherent value, your indestructible value. That is more powerful than anything else. And again, it's not like we have karmas and then we don't have them because we feel our value. It doesn't really work like that, unfortunately. It's more like we start to feel more of our inherent value, and our karmas become more obvious to us as what they are, but they still have momentum. So they're still like operating, but we become more and more detached. We're not buying into them as much. And then eventually we just become desperate to get rid of them. And being in a more consistent and more receptive relationship with that alive, aware intelligence also causes at some point for us to realize that it isn't actually up to our struggle. Our struggle is almost irrelevant. Our practice isn't irrelevant, but our struggle is irrelevant. Our self-concern is irrelevant. Our self-worry is irrelevant. It leads absolutely nowhere, gets us nothing. And anyway, everybody is 100% pre-approved. So, it makes no difference because you're 100% pre-approved. In whatever condition you're in, it doesn't matter. A murderer could walk in the door. They'd be 100% pre-approved. It doesn't matter what you do or don't do. You're 100% approved.
That's kind of hard to hear.
I know, because we're always looking for like a ladder we can climb and a reward we can get and like the prize we can win and the certificate and that's how our whole culture works. That's what it's all based on. Measuring up and being better and proving oneself.
Yeah, and one of those sticks is how close am I to the teachers?
Well, being close to the teacher and vying for the teacher's approval on some superficial level are completely different. Being close to the teacher is terrifying. Vying for the teacher's approval is extremely familiar and comfortable. Being close to the teacher means being in the river with the teacher, and the river is moving and you're not in control. It's a totally immersive situation. And most people are trying to fend that off. But that's okay too. Doesn't really matter. That's just how things are. Being in the river is called being a non-returner, meaning you've just thrown your whole life into this process. Hardly anyone does that. So that also is not something you should strive to achieve or think you want the teacher to think you're in the river. Mm-hmm. That is ridiculous. You should just be yourself.
That's a crazy statement. You should just be yourself. I mean, like, how can I help but do that?
That's true. That's true. But, I mean, on the one level, even your efforts to be something else, more acceptable or more approvable, that's being yourself too. But what I mean is relax. Just relax.
Yeah.
Stop pretending. Stop projecting. Stop struggling. Stop trying to massage everybody's opinion of you. Get off the merry-go-round. That's what I mean when I say be yourself. That's what the teacher really wants from you. That's what I want. I want to be with people who are just comfortable being their messy selves.